G'day, you're listening to the Big Breakdown podcast with Kris, Stafford and Harrison Marshall. Take it away, fellas.
And welcome along to season 2 of the Big Breakdown podcast, where we are delving into the mindset of serial-winning coaches, and today we are looking at culture. Harrison, I think we've covered so far vision, people and environment and coaching philosophy. I think culture is going to be really important to bring it all together.
Definitely. Culture underpins all of those, and if you can embed a strong culture, then it helps with the people, vision, environment and philosophy really come through and shine.
Definitely, and we've got a really exciting guest to come on and chat about it today. Today we are joined by Jack Gooding. Jack is Director of Rugby and Athletic Development at Redlands School in Australia. Jack is an experienced rugby coach who's worked across Schoolboy Rugby at academy level and also professional rugby both in Australia and abroad. He gained his level 3 rugby union qualification in New Zealand, and it's allowed him to develop his coaching and has become an educator. With a background predominantly focused on attack, Jack has taken the challenge to lead a defensive role at Sydney University Rugby in the Shute Shield Competition, and he's currently working across different representative pathways in Australia Schoolboy and age grades championships in Sydney, and also for Rugby Western Australia. Jack joins us today to chat about culture. Jack, how are you?
Doing very, very well, Kris. I'm really looking forward to this opportunity, so I can't thank you guys enough.
Yeah, I'm. When you messaged about coming on and helping with the episode, and knowing that we're all three of us are in sort of within education environments, I think some of the conversations we can have about culture, I think, will be really, really interesting. So first of all, I think straight off the bat is why is culture important, especially for coaches to be aware of?
I think one of the reasons why is because I think culture's become that almost communication, the word that we constantly banter about as coaches. And I think the reason we do it is because we identify how important it is, and it's quite tough to sometimes put a name to it, and so we just blurt out culture is important in a site. But I think one of the reasons why I sort of wanted to join this conversation is culture creates a huge sense of identity, and it can give your team and give your club an amazing foundation for success. But also, I think more importantly, it can lay a foundation for continued success, which is one of the things that we sort of strive for as coaches. So I think it's a challenging word, and it's one that needs to be discussed openly within clubs, because it's actually quite crucial to what you're trying to create as coaches.
Yeah, and it's something that I think that is talked about a lot, especially the top level of the game, around teams that have got this culture or identity. And there's been a lot of positive stories from I think it's more especially influence from the Southern Hemisphere that sort of come in and sort of really push this within the environments that we work in. So how does we spoke about vision, people, environment and coaching philosophy. How can culture help bring all them together?
Because I think what culture does, or creating a sense of culture within a club, it draws in the why. And when we talk about the why within a side, I'm constantly amazed as a coach that within semi-professional, professional or schoolboy sides, how diverse the reasons your players are playing the game are. And it's anything from, I am very, very good at rugby and this is a great career path for me, to love of the game, playing with my mates. And what culture does is it starts setting up a framework for everyone to move towards a common goal. And when you have a whole team and a club and a system and everyone around it moving towards a common goal, the momentum you have from that just breeds success. And also it actually protects you when you're suffering losses or you're in a downslide, because you have that kind of foundation set underneath you. I think also one of the scary things about culture as well is it's a double-edged sword, in the sense of it's something that we can really strive for, but if you push too hard for it and you try and create culture where there isn't culture, it can have a huge detrimental effect across a team and a club. So it's a really interesting concept, and something that it is one of the first words bandied about in every single club nowadays. You know, what is our culture? What are our non-negotiables?
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. And I think last season, season 1 of the podcast, we broke down coaching into understanding our who, what, and how. And I think what I've realised through all these conversations with multiple different coaches around the world now, is that understanding our who is pivotal to everything, and that probably then leads on to the kind of culture that you want to embed. So I think your point around trying to force a culture. So, us as coaches, we've got to be quite flexible in terms of how we create that culture. So, I can't go in with, I know what my culture needs to be, and this is what I'm going to imprint on the players. You've got to go in with that open mindset of, right, let's understand why the players are here, what do they want, and then start to build those foundations of culture around them. So how have you kind of gone through that process of, understanding, I think, your students, the players that you've got, and then what then kind of led to creating the culture that you've looked to implement within your own environments?
Well, I think Harrison, I think you've hit the nail on the head with a word called process. And when we're outcome focused, often we hear about outcome focused and process focused. And when you're outcome focused, when it's leading to culture, you are single-mindedness with what you think the best culture for your club is. And if you go in there and you get everyone on the same page, it can work. I had a situation when I first took over the school program that I'm at. I came from an incredibly strict rugby background of South African schoolboy, and I installed that model at a very timid Sydney private school. And it worked because the boys were striving for results. They had a losing culture. And so me coming in and just drubbing in that we're going to win worked. But then 2 years later, it started to fall apart. Now we were still winning. And I had to pull myself back and go, well, what have I done? And I realized that everything that I'd created had been totally driven by myself. And there was very little to no player input. And so switching to that process outcome, I actually had to almost prepare myself for a differing opinion. Were the players going to say that, what we find important isn't winning? I came from a school where, you lost and you immediately got judged as a coach. We had winning seasons in South Africa, and to go to a school where winning wasn't the priority. And in our first kind of 2019, 2020, we really made a cultural shift within our program, and the players drove that. And you have to be open, and you have to be able to adapt, and vulnerable. I think vulnerability as a coach when you're looking at culture is huge, and knowing that you can say something wrong, daring players to challenge, because when you start to have players challenging in an environment where they're able to and they feel comfortable to talk about their emotions, that's when you start to look at a positive culture within a club. Obviously within reason, but it's but I think that's what you nailed it with that process word, Harrison, is you have to be able to see the forest for the trees and think of, I've got to let this happen organically. I can't force this. I can't say I want this to be our culture, and if it doesn't eventuate, I've failed, because that's outcome based. I've got to say, this is where I think we could go with this, and then let the players discover. Because when you have player driven learning, that's when you get the best results.
So have you got any examples about how you've got the players to that point then, in terms of, has it been a bit of workshops? Has it been through, I know there's quite a big buzzword around leadership groups and how you can influence. What's the best way to go at it?
I reckon the one that I had the most fun with was our school emblem, or our school animal that's linked to our school, is a rhino. And if you were to see my rugby team, there is no animal that is less indicative of our school. You know, we've got our tight head prop will weigh 70 kilos soaking wet, right? And so when we sat down in a meeting and we talked about everything that we can bring to a game as players, and I got the players to list their individual strengths. And then I went backwards and everyone had to list their weaknesses and list others' weaknesses and other people's strengths. And so we started to sort of almost create this mind map of what our first 15 will look like for next year. And we talked about the players that had come before us and what they had given us and what they've now lost. So we created this kind of almost like mind map of what our game is. And that it was going the way that I wanted. I wanted us to play a more up-tempo style of game and be more adaptive with how we attack and where we attack from. And they were getting there. It was sort of, you know, this wonderful flow nature kind of. And I then put on a video of a David Attenborough documentary of wild dogs hunting. And it's this amazing clip. It goes for about 2 minutes and it's a pack of dogs, and you know, David Attenborough's sultry tones are going over it. And he talks about how they hunt as a pack. And when one tires at the front, another one takes over. And then, you know, he's narrating it through and they're hunting down this wildebeest. And then right on cue, one dog gets lost and he gets away from the pack. And then the pack calls him and he accelerates and joins the pack and they pull down this wildebeest. And the boys just got G'd up. Like they just thought it was the greatest in the world. Like they're, you know, banging the desks. I'm doing a little bit of emotional energy stirring behind the scenes. And that became our season. It became the Wild Dogs of Redlands. And then from that, we created our pack rules. And, you know, what are we going to stand for? And then it was all based off that kind of linear thought process of, you know, are we a rhino or are we the Wild Dogs? And then the boys expanded from that. And then all of our attack and all of our set piece moves and all of our defense became, it was aggressive. Everything that we did was chopping legs and snapping at heels and that emotional energy that we created around that kind of like non-negotiables of our program was so easy, because then throughout the year we just had to pull back to our, you know, these are our training habits. This is how we play. And I think that's probably one of the best examples I've had of a group building and creating their culture, and also knowing that it has to adapt. You know, our side for next year, we've got a gigantic inside centre. He's probably one of our strongest players coming through the ranks. So are we the Wild Dogs anymore? Probably not. You know, now we've got what do we take from our previous program and our previous generation, and how do we adapt that? You know, what are the positives we take? What are the negatives we take? So once you create that, it's so easy to push power onto the players to further build their identity.
And that's something that Owen Eastwood talks about in his book Belonging, was around that connection with the elders and how you need to know what sort of come before you in order to influence where you are now. And he talks in his book an example of when he was working with the Scotland national team with Vern Cotter, and I think we touched on it on the episode with Richard Smith around how he sent someone away to go and do some research about how Scottish tribes used to prepare for war against the English, and how actually their working week was exactly the same as what a working week of an international rugby player would be. They'd meet on the Monday, they'd go through some strategy, they'd all get, well, maybe not so much now, but all get leathered on like the Thursday, talk about what they're going to do ready for the war on the Saturday, and then go off and fight. And it was kind of that similar sort of process that he then connected to the Scottish national team. They came up with the Thistle group, of that was going to be their key driver of how they connected with the elders and how they were going to drive that forward to keep that standard. Have you had examples where you've brought maybe some of the previous group that help influence the new ones? Because I'm just thinking from like I said earlier, with us all being in sort of education, how we can continue that culture through without losing anything, but also adapting it as we go as well.
It sounds like a horrible quote, but a quote that I've used before is your success is built on the bodies of others. And one of the ones that we've done really well with our team building is we've had an amazing cycle with our program at Redlands, in the sense of, when I first took over, the previous year we'd won 4 games from 36 as a program across the whole school. And then we'd been demoted down a division. It was terrible attitude with uniform, but there was something there. Like, there was something to seize on. And we turned it around. So I had a week and a half pre-season with them when we went straight into a season. And as a program, we won 33 from 36. So a total reversal. But one thing I said to them, and one thing you talk about empowering your elders and building things off. The first thing we ever did, the first change we did, is we retired our first 15 jersey after that year. And the point that I made, I said, we're never going to play Division 3 rugby again. So this jersey never needs to be worn again. But we should take that as a sense of pride. So you Year 12 boys who are wearing this jersey, you're the last ones to ever wear that. So when you ever come to a game, wear that jersey, because it's a symbol of where we've come from. Then the big thing as well is we talked about our foundation members. So players that have gone above and beyond for our program, and there's specific jerseys in our program that have initials on the inside. So our number 8 jersey has RM for a wonderful boy. He's actually living in the UK now. Probably a little bit of a shout out to him, of Ryan Martin. So he's playing, I think, similar competition to you guys. So his initials are on the inside of our number 8 jersey. On the inside of our 7, we've got another 2 sets of initials. But players that have been the foundation members, because the big thing for us is we now regularly get to semi-final and grand final in our competition. We haven't won the grand final yet. But the thing that I constantly instill is that we're going to win it off the framework that you boys have built. So when our 2022 captain hoists the shield, the fingerprints of our 2019 captain are going to be on it all over. And when you create that, the buy-in that you can get from the group, because then you start talking legacy. And when you start talking legacy with students, professional players, or anything like that, that's when you can start to create some magic, because it's a word that doesn't often get used, but it's a word that's got so much more behind it.
Yeah, and I think I totally agree, and we've adopted something quite similar here. So I used to work with Kris at Leeds Beckett. I'm now at the City of Oxford College. And it's our first year of being in what they call the RFU Ace League. So we've kind of, the message we've got out to our students is that you're laying the foundations. This is the first year we're representing the college in the Ace League. So I like that idea of retiring that jersey, because that's that class that's got us in this position. So yeah, I think the other thing that's kind of interesting, and it's something that we've kind of explored this year, is creating a theme for the season. I think that allows people to buy into a culture. I mean, like for us in terms of our theme, we've very much gone with like the military, and we've broken it down into 3 key areas. So for our attack, it's the SAS, and their motto is "Who dares wins," because our attack is right. Can we be brave enough? Can we take it to them? From defence, it's the SBS with strength and guile, and those kind of messages really allow the players to buy in. If you're dealing with students that you said that were had issues with uniform and behavioural stuff, how have you have you got any examples of how you've kind of got them to buy into the process, to buy into that living organism that is culture, that is environment and team, and getting them on the pitch?
there's a couple of good examples. One of the first things I discovered is that our boys would get changed immediately after training. And when I quizzed them, it was because they didn't want to get on a bus wearing the crest, because we're not known for our rugby. And it was, they'd get on a bus with other schools in our area that are very strong rugby programs, and they felt a bit embarrassed by saying, Redlands first 15. So one of the first things we did is we changed the training jersey, and we changed we actually changed our kit. So we went more to a traditional old school English kit, dark navy ink, no color, just solid as anything, and plain navy shorts. So it just looks menacing. And our away kit went to all gold. So that was our kind of like our tuxedo uniform. Right? And by changing that, kids love kit. Players love kit. My favorite day as a coach is kit day. Right? And when we created that, then I just enforced it. And I said, we had this great kid who was meant to be our best player in the team. And, because they had lost the previous year, he didn't turn up for the first 2 weeks. And we flogged. Like, we won these amazing games. And then he turns up in Jordan shorts. And I was like, hey, how you going, mate? He goes, hey, I'm Alex. I'm here to play. I go, perfect, mate. You can walk back up to the school because you're not in kit. And he's like, oh, but I don't have kit. And I was like, that's not my problem. And I was like, just see you next week. He goes, oh, can I play on the weekend? I was like, well, mate, it's too late now. And so we set benchmarks, and you have to. It's hard because in school programs and clubs and stuff like that, you have to dare yourself. You've got to stick firm, because the first time that your best player who's going to win you a match stuffs up and you allow it, then the cracks have already started to sort of fall in. But in terms of like creating like key little things that we like link our culture to, a big one was changing our home and away jerseys. A big one was creating like a bit of an aura around our team. So we didn't have a team song, and you talk about creating something organically. You trying to force an invented team song on 30 under 18 schoolboys and get them to sing it is incredibly tough. So I had to think about how we install this. And so we had this pre-season camp, and it was just the greatest environment, and it was hard, and we were doing a lot of rugby, and we had this team song. So I got the cards laminated with this team song, and I said, everyone, you got to carry it in your pocket for the whole training today. And so of course, boys being boys, at any stoppage, they would read it and chat amongst them and stuff like that. And sort of, and then at the end, there was a lake near us, like a dam, and they all jumped into the dam to cool off after the session. So they're all full kit. And I said, perfect, get your songs out. And so in like neck deep water, we sang our team song for the first ever time. And they just shouted it out, and it was brilliant. And then they ran up and they had to perform it in front of the girls who were down there for netball. And our team song clicked. And they said, perfect, we know it off by heart. We don't sing it again until our first win. And I just remember that, it was so fitting. The team that we played to start our season was the team that demoted us the year before, or 2 years ago. And last time they played, they beat us, I think something like 55-10. And we just shellacked them, was so prepared, wonderful game. And then after, I remember the last 5 minutes, our boys could almost they were on eggshells ready for the team song. And then and it was just one of those, everything fell into place. Our under 13s had just finished their game, came across, first 15, belt this song out, go mental, and that was it. And you just go, perfect, clicked in. But I look back at that situation, I go, if I had tried to force that after a Tuesday training, hey boys, this is our team song from now on, let's sing it, they would have gone, no, this is embarrassing. Why are we going to do this?
And that goes back to what you said earlier around just getting everyone to buy in and have that desire to sort of be part of it and have that accountability. You know, I think, you know, by setting them standards, everyone knows sort of where they sit within it, and then if they stray without them, then they've got to be accountable for that. Obviously, we spoke a lot there about the school environment. Is there anything that's done differently when you've been working with Sydney University and the Shute Shield, or have you adapted it slightly, or have you walked into the culture that was already established, and how did you adapt to that?
So I've been lucky enough that I've been involved in a couple of clubs, and I think a really nice kind of comparison is I've been at a club before where it had good culture. You know, the players trained hard. You know, we won. We played some beautiful rugby, but there was always this sense that our emotional energy as a group was all tied to revving up. So it's like, you know, if we were doing a drill bad, the volume would go up and the drill would get better. If we were going through our run-throughs poor, the volume would go up, the sense of urgency would go up, and that panicked voice would go up, and it would get better. And I remember saying to a coach, saying, "Listen, this isn't good. That's not good. If we're propping up with like all these like slogans and like, you know, these little throwaway sentences that link to our culture, and that's what we're trying to prop this up with, it's all going to fall apart because our boys will lose. They'll cry in the sheds because it's an emotional thing, but they'll be a week later, they'll be up in the stands watching the other team go into the semi-final." The flip side to that is having just come across to Sydney Uni, walking into an incredibly set and structured culture. I couldn't believe the lack of emotional energy needed. It was like, we did a contact session last week, and, you know, we as players and coaches, we've been in contact sessions, and, you got the coach screaming, you know, to hit the pads and, you know, all this fire and brimstone and hit him and all that kind of stuff. This thing was like cold-blooded, like assassin-like, with how off two-step run-ups, these guys were just absolutely smashing into each other, but no emotional energy tied to it, just systematic. And I spoke to one of the coaches who's been there for a while, and I pointed it out, and he actually couldn't see it because to him, that's just normal. And you wonder about these like high performance environments, or you wonder, you think about why some clubs just have it, and that's it, you know. And I remember hearing this, there was this wonderful little discussion as these players left, and they just finished murking each other for 15 minutes. And one of the players said, why are we doing defense off two-step run-ups? You know, why are we doing such a small detail? And like, I think he half finished the sentence, and a guy nipped it in the butt. Quit complaining, this is what we do. And you just think, how powerful a sentence is that? Get in line, this is what we do. And one of my best mate played for many years at Sydney Uni, and I spoke to him about it, and he was the same. He couldn't see it. You know, as me as an outsider, I can identify that, new to that environment and coming from different environments. But he was like, that's just the way we do it. And it's very similar to what you start to see in these international setups. So like I having seen examples of how Eddie Jones has coached previously, I can watch the, you know, rising sun and see his softening and see how he is softened. And yet, if you ask any of the players, there is still that incredible steel behind it. But so he has adapted, but he's still stayed true to his ideals, which is very similar to what Sydney Uni have done. They've adapted, they've changed their game plan, they've brought in new players, they've brought in cultural differences into their clubs, different resources. But the underlying thing in that club is just, you'll work harder than every single person. Every other person in the program, you'll work harder than. Which is
It very much reminds me of I remember listening to a podcast and Rio Ferdinand was on, and he was talking about Sir Alex Ferguson and the culture that they built at Manchester United, and it almost became all encompassing. It was very much driven by the players that, you know, they're there to win. You're at Manchester United. We're here to win. But he's come through his career and he's kind of reflected on it in terms of, yeah, it was almost that drive was so high that they took away kind of like the mental health and mental well-being and looking after players, and you know, and he was actually I think he admitted that he was so hard on some players that they almost got driven kind of out of the club because it was so fixed within their culture. Is that something that, you know, you're kind of wary of when you're, you know, it's great to have that intensity and to be switched on and to be laser focused in terms of hard work, but you know, I think the way that the modern world is going, in which, you know, we're having, you know, the latest generations are a little bit more individual, you know, individualism is more celebrated. You know, I think, you know, that idea of like we can still celebrate differences alongside unity, you know, is that kind of a worry that, you know, some players or people who genuinely are talented at rugby might be put off by quite an intense kind of culture that goes alongside it?
100%. And an example I often use, like to like sort of gauge a room is I go, I'm going to describe a team, and everyone hates everyone, and there is physical, verbal, and mental bullying at every facet of the game. The coaches are abusive, and they're physically abusive at times. Right? The locker room is poisonous. No one hangs out with anyone, and yet every single game you will win, and you'll win every game by 30 plus points. Raise your hand if you want to play in that team. And I would raise my hand, because as a player and early on in my coaching career, it was all about winning. I didn't care if we were winning, that was good, because I could deal with all the other mental anxieties. I could, you know, compartmentalize them in my head and deal with them. But the most amazing thing is that there are very few players at any level that will put their hand up for that situation. So creating that win at all cost environment, it can breed results. Diamonds can be created from great pressure. But if you look at the All Blacks like mantra that they sit on is mistakes are okay, as long as you own them, and as long as you're making mistakes because you're having a go, you're taking the risk. Right now, it's very interesting at the moment. You look at how the All Blacks are starting to change their culture, because they've, if you watch their last couple of games, they almost play like they can win from no matter what score they're behind. You know, there's this idea that we are so skilled and we're so committed to our attack and our systems that if we're 14 points down, we can win. Now they're having to shift that because, you know, there's guys not cherishing the ball and all that type of stuff. So I'll be really interested to see how they refine their culture leading into this World Cup. But Harrison, you're 100% that mental torture environment can work, but it's not sustainable. Now, when I say it's not sustainable, Manchester United had an incredible run of success. And yet I reckon you'll find that there's scars in their program from that approach, because every coach who's come into it has tried to either replicate what Sir Alex Ferguson had or tried to do the opposite. And you've got to find your own path. So it's a really, I think it's always a really interesting, because the why of players and the what and how and where they're at mentally is always going to change.
I think that's something that from a community sport school, we always coaches. It's an interesting conversation we had with John Lyle actually around the level of coaching and it being a profession and how it actually isn't recognised as a profession, and the majority is volunteer based, and because of that, the coaches will observe how Sir Alex Ferguson was, how Eddie Jones, an example, might have been try and replicate that themselves. But actually, that isn't Shute himself or the environment they're working in. And one of the things we've emphasised a lot on, I think we've referenced it in every episode, Harrison, is coming from the Masters, what works for who in what circumstance and why, and how you've got to be adaptable when you go into these different environments to make it right for the players. And that just because, that might have worked for Alex Ferguson, but like you say, now, Solskjaer's tried to replicate what they had then, but it's still not working for him, despite, the money that he's spending on bringing players in to fix it. So it just shows that you do have to adapt with what's coming in, but still connect to, well, what did we have in the good old days that we can try and replicate, but adapt to keep us ticking over and find that success again.
100%, and I think that's why coaching is so much fun, but it's so much, there's so much to it, because essentially, where if you were to describe a coach in nowadays, it's pastoral, it's holistic, it's mental. You look at, you have to be adaptable, but you have to stick firm to your values. You have to be malleable with how you put a team together, but you have to have an overall plan. So it's almost it's counterintuitive. Every single aspect of coaching, there is a negative. Every single aspect of how you approach a session, there's an alternative. And so as a coach, that's why culture is so important, because if you allow your players, and you're running strong systems, and you're running an attractive style of attack, and you've got defensive principles of play, and you've got culture, well, then you've got framework where it's very easily identifiable where you've stuffed up. You've also got framework of where it's very easily identifiable where you're doing well. I think it's always really interesting, like when you look at personalities and how you put teams together. Do we want an entire team of sheep? You're not going to win with an entire team of sheep. Do you want an entire team of micromanagers or leaders? You can't. Do you want an entire team of introverts? You can't. But one of the most wonderful things is if you put introverts in a rugby team and give them a sense of identity and give them a voice, introverts become some of the most amazing leaders. I mean, look at a Johnny Wilkinson, one of the players that overthought every single detail of his game, and has left highly identifiable scars mentally, and he's now reprocessing it. But yet, in that pressure cooker, I mean, go to his go to his Toulouse speech. One of the most inspirational moments as a leader, and yet totally introverted. Drop him into a public, arena, and he'll go right to the wall. And that's one of the most, it's one of the most complex things about being a coach, is you've got to read your players. I remember the first time I started coaching Islander boys, I couldn't believe how things that I take incredibly seriously, if I was giving them a spray about missing an attacking opportunity, they would think it's funny, because when you yell at them, sometimes they just think it's funny. And yet things that I take incredibly lightheartedly, they take incredibly seriously. I remember I used to have like a really neat fade, right? And one of the boys got and he'd obviously asked for it too short. And, it was kind of that past the point where it almost gets to like a top knot. And I was like, Lecky, that you got butchered, my man. And he just face dropped and went off, and he was bawling his eyes. He came back the next day, had cut it all off. And I sort of thought, oh my God. And what I didn't realize is that, he was really self-conscious about him and he didn't feel emotionally strong within that structure where someone could give him a bit of a jab. And I thought, wow, hang on a sec, I've got to rethink this. How do I bring this guy into it so he's comfortable in that situation? So it's the most it's why I love coaching, because it's so complex, and yet you have to be able to simplify things.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah, I totally agree. And there's probably lots of, I can You know, there's lots of coaches that are great technical and tactical led coaches, but because they lack that holistic approach, like you said, that's where they've kind of, you know, the way that, especially where the modern way of coaching has gone, is they've kind of, you know, hit that ceiling. You know, it's I think it's interesting, you know, when you talk about understanding, especially when you've got a wide range of players. So, you know, from, you know, the Islanders to your traditional, you know, your Aussie boys. How have you found mixing and integrating them all together? Has there been any kind of clashes, or has it just been one kind of successful melting pot?
Well, so I'm really lucky in the sense that I'm involved in quite across quite a few of the representative age groups, and the association that Redlands belongs to. So we play Division 2, but Division 1 have some really strong rugby schools, and from that we form a team called ISA, so Independent Sport Association. And we play your big traditional rugby schools in their combined associations. But we get an amazing mix because our association is actually quite spread out. So we get players from way out in the country, from Bathurst and Orange. And we also get guys from inner west and western suburbs and Penrith and Blacktown area. So your sort of traditional league heartlands. So it's a really interesting mix. And I love it because I think if I was to say one of my strengths as a coach is I'm very personable to. I'm interested in everyone. So if you're from the country, I'm really interested in like when's the next harvest, and you know, do you guys have cows or sheep, or you know, I've got interest there. And then if you're from the western suburbs, who do you support for league or vice versa? Like where I can find common ground with players. So when you're putting that melting pot of all these different personalities of schools that traditionally play each other, you've got to catch lightning in the bottle really quick and build that team identity as quick as possible. And I think that's one of the reasons why I love those type of like short, you know, 4 or 5 rugby sessions. Then you've got 3 games in a row or 4 games in a row. Honestly, hand across heart, my favourite team I've ever coached was the 2019 ISA B side, because I stayed right out of selections, and I still to this day, I don't know how my team was selected as the Bs, because I had world-class players. And yet, they went this wonderful moment, so sort of 2 squads of 33, 2 squads of 33 or 25, sort of descend down into one area. Coach reads out the teams and they split. So I avoided knowing the team. And my group walked over to me, and the first thing I said to them, I said, "We are going to pump this." And they said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Boys," I said, look over at them. They're going to wear the black jerseys of the A's, and in a week's time, we're going to beat them. All right? And we just created this identity. We created this chip on our shoulder, and everything that we did had more venom to it. Everything that we did had more intensity, and they could just never match us. So when we entered the tournament, the way our tournament is designed is our B side plays the top pooled team, which is GPS ones, and the idea is that they will beat us by 70 traditionally. And then we flip to the other side of the pool. So eventually they'll get the GPS versus CAS at the top for the last game of the day. And we came into this thing and we designed a play. So we said that the kickoff, they expect us to do a terrible kickoff. So let's do a terrible kickoff. So we said that we're going to grubber it for our kickoff. So, because they'll just stop, because they'll think it's a terrible kick, and we'll whack them. And it was everything just, this narrative was built and just everything clicked into place, and we drubbed GPS. We lost, but we played this 7-5 loss that was just brutal. And then from that, we stayed on that side of the pool and ended up just whomping all the way through and getting to the second last game of the day, which is just unheard of for our association. But that side, we created something with such a diverse group, And of all things, I Zoomed with them the other day because they're all going into their HSC or their final exams, your A levels. And I Zoomed with them, and it's just a special group. You know, we had something, and it worked. So in terms of mixing those different cultures and different backgrounds, as long as you have an identity that all of them can pull to and pull others to, then you're going to be moving forward.
I think that's the key word with culture, and it's, you know, creating an identity in which everyone can join in. And like I said, identity is everything. If I feel I can identify, even if it's changing the kit, so when I'm on the bus, I've got that identity about me, and if we can carry and represent ourselves with that identity away from the pitch as well, it means that when the rough stuff and the backs against the wall on the pitch, we can revert back to, right, I'm representing the identity that I've bought into as a cohort. So yeah, I think I totally agree. Identity is the forefront of what culture is for me.
Final things really, right, when you messaged me about sort of, you said this is an area that's sort of really, what kind of stuff sort of really influenced, guided you with your team, from your existing experience of being in Africa or New Zealand, now being in Australia, books that you've read, or what sort of got you to the point of realising why and how culture is important, and then how straight?
I think one thing I've learned is that I really enjoy to be challenged, and it's taken a long while to do that. You know, when you first start your coaching journey, you're so worried about being wrong. So what we end up doing is we don't put ourselves outside of our comfort zone. You know, if you're a back, you coach backs. If you're a forward, you coach forwards. You know, if you're a scrum specialist, you coach scrums. And we put these blinkers on that effectively actually keep us on a very narrow path. For, you know, it can be forever. And it actually, of all things, it's probably taken me up until the New Zealand level 3 course was when I first truly identified that I love to be challenged. And it was the opening day. They got us to plan a drill. They gave us a scenario. We had to run a drill, and we planned it to have 12 players available to run a drill. And I had a horrible topic. I had create a drill that practices counter-attack off a ruck turnover. And I was like, how specific can you get? And I planned it for 12 players, and then the first thing they do is they go, perfect, you have 3 players to do your drill and adapt. And you know, I watched players melt and coaches melt. And I did, you know, the first thing, you know, you almost feel like pulling out the brown paper bag and hyperventilating because you're like, am I going to fail on the first day? But I learned that I love to be challenged. And when you're challenging your own thoughts, you seek out others, and you seek out other challenges, and you become more observant of what's around you. You know, I think my coaching development has accelerated as a result of being challenged. And I've been very, very lucky. I've worked in some incredible environments. St Andrews in South Africa was fantastic. You know, for my development as a coach, for my confidence in my coaching. You know, results are always going to give you more confidence. But I look at the different environments I've put myself in, and how I'm now challenging, and how also I'm starting to think. You know, I think I have a really good understanding of rugby, but I like to think that I'm observant of others. I'm also incredibly lucky that I've had some incredible mentors, and I've got some amazing people around me that I can bounce ideas off. And some of them not have any fear of being judged, and some have a total, absolute petrified fear of being judged, which is it's good. You know, it can be daunting. But I think when it comes to things like culture, and I think, you know, to pull it back to that, it's something when we talk about players belonging, but when you belong as a coach, when you buy in, and when you walk into an environment, we talk about if you love your job, you're never going to work a day in your life. Well, if you've created an environment where your players are developing and improving, and they're completing steps ahead of you, then you get a huge sense of enjoyment out of it, and you belong to a culture. And so often we talk about players and identity and the why. Well, why do you coach? What's the reason why you coach? Mine used to be winning. Still to this day, a lot of it is to do with winning. But my why now is, you create the greatest backline play and you watch it come off. That moment, if you could bottle that and sell it, you'd make $1 million. You talk about, I had a moment this year, and I took a player, and probably I'm biased. We shouldn't have favourites, but I always have favourites. And I took my favourite player from Norths, and after training, we walked through 5 phases of attack. Lights are off on the field, bit of moonlight, all that kind of stuff, and walked through 5 phases of attack of how he's going to score down the short side and how it's going to feel when he scores down the short side from 40 out, and what he had to do at the first phase, the second phase, the third phase, 4th and 5th. And we walked through it, and 3 weeks later he did it. Everything, word for word, step for step, every single point of it. And the look on his face as we got direct eye contact, you can't capture that. So I think, I think coaching is a huge journey and it's never finished. And the sad thing is a lot of coaches do think that they think, oh, that's it, I've reached the point. I've taken on all learning that I can possibly learn, and this is now me as a coach. But if you're not learning and developing, you might as well be out of it. One of my main reasons for taking a defensive role this year is that I'm petrified of coaching defense. I'm a totally attack-focused coach. I love attack. I love everything about forward, home shape, backline moves, everything, phase, all that kind of stuff. And I'm coaching defense. And defense, sometimes the afterthought. Everyone wants to do run-throughs. No one wants to do defense. And that's why I'm so excited for this opportunity, because every day is going to be a challenge. Every day I've got to be accountable as a coach. You lose 17-5. The first question isn't why didn't we score 20 more points? It's why did we let in 17 points? So to sort of, bring it back, I think having that sense of identity and everything pulling back to the why is so important as a coach and as a player. And my journey through multiple different environments has allowed me to shape what I think is why I coach. And also, I think it's also shaped why I like to be challenged.
Yeah, no, it's it's the whole thing of culture. I was at Harrison actually half saying about how I'd got reflecting back, I'd sort of got a little bit lazy within my coaching and post-COVID. All like the habit before that, I didn't get that little bit sloppy. And then that Harrison, that little bit of the arse to start getting back into what I was doing before, and we've seen a noticeable shift. How the lads are, one, performing at training, and two, how we're actually doing in the game. So, like you say, you've got to push yourself out of that comfort zone. You've got to be able to reflect. You've got to be able to realise that how can you adapt and to keep that going forward to get the best out of yourself, but also the players that you're coaching. Because you're right. You've constantly got to evolve. You can't sit still, because if you sit still, you'll end up be the one that's falling behind. And I think that's a really important takeaway for coaching development and coach education in general.
I think on that one as well, Kris, though, I think one thing as well is if you're worried about you're not evolving, bring other people in. You look at the England setup. there is a specific reason of why Eddie brings in those assistant coaches, because he knows what he is as a coach. He knows the strengths and he knows what he can offer to that program. But he also knows that if he has just yes men, he won't get challenged, and it'll be an environment that isn't challenging for him. Now he's going to challenge those coaches. I pity some of the conversations he'll have with assistant coaches. But he also, if you ever feel like you're challenged, bring in another coach. Assign a duty that you like to another coach and take a bad duty. If you love coaching attack, or if you love doing lineouts, give it to someone else. Because you're going to learn very quickly to challenge yourself. I'll be the first to say I stayed so far into my comfort zone for so many years of my coaching. And, when I love forward attack and I love backline attack, but, anytime anyone would say defense, I'd be like, all right, we'll go inside to out and push them to a sideline. And if they've got dominant inside and outside centers, we'll blitz. Just, if there were any following questions after that, you just sort of smile and nod and hope there's there's a plate of food in front of you that you can mumble through. But, now I real you got to take them. You got to enjoy them. I'm lucky. I've got one mentor that gives me nothing, absolutely nothing, no positive whatsoever. Just I give him an idea, he goes, yep, and moves to the next one. So there's no reward from me, but it's an outlet for me to throw. If I say something stupid, it comes back really quick. So, get yourself, if you feel like you're stagnant, if you feel like you're you're in your comfort zone and you're coaching on autopilot, change it up.
I think that's some great advice. Jack, it's been great having you on. I think there's been a lot of connection with a lot of the other episodes that we've had as well around that people vision environment. And philosophy, and I think it emphasizes the importance of why culture needs to be considered alongside this, about how it's something that we can develop, it's something that we can help shape, and it's something that can help sustain that long-term success. And that, I think that's something that people can really take away. So thanks for giving up your time. I appreciate it's pretty much nearly there. So you stayed up late for us for this. I appreciate that.
No, guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. I could not be more excited for what you guys are doing. It's these type of forums, it's making our world smaller and smaller and smaller. And when you tighten that circle up, you get more collaboration, and more collaboration gets some absolutely amazing results. So well done to you guys. And honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure, guys.
Cheers. Thank you.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Harrison, we had a great chat with Jack there around culture. I think there's so much there that coaches can take away. And I think it links up really well to the whole thing of coaching philosophy, vision, people, and environment. Yes.
Oh, I think he came and he brought everything together quite nicely, and actually summarised how how culture really underpins it. And he gave and it's cracking to hear someone from the complete opposite side of the globe talk about an environment I'm in his way, and then also for you as a university as well. So yeah, lots and lots of takeaways. Was there anything that kind of stood out massively for you initially?
Well, I like the examples that he gave around, even though it was relatively new, is connecting with the people that have been there before and having the initials on the inside of the jersey, and that people understand the belonging of where it's come from them. Because especially working in the university environment where there's been that, you've got that cycle anyway of year on year, there's new students to come in that you've got to embed within the club, I suppose. And especially now coming through COVID, where you've not had that, and it's trying to re-engage with these lads about where it's come from and where it is now is actually really important to continue the development. And even it's interesting to know that even in schoolboy rugby, even though it's taken very seriously over in Australia, it's still an important part of how they set up and how they develop their programs. I think it's just interesting how much culture, even at that age group, can be influenced by what's come before.
Totally, I think, but then I also think that legacy is something that we all want in life. You want to leave, you want to feel as if you're, whether it's rugby or whether it's a business environment or any kind of environment, you want to know and you want to feel like what you're leaving behind, are positive memories, are positive changes that you brought to the environments that you're working in. So, I think it's nice that he's aware of, Jack was obviously aware of legacy being important, and that's a real kind of buy-in into helping create that culture that he had within the school and in the university. So yeah, and I think I love the the acronym and the stories of when we win the grand final and the captain's holding the trophy up, it will have the fingerprints of the previous captains that have got them there, and that's I think that's so powerful in terms of, right, I'm buying into this, I'm buying into my school, but I know that everything that I do will continue to get the school in a better place. So it really goes back to something that underlined throughout the whole episode, and that's identity. That culture is an identity, in which allows us as coaches, and that was the other coaches as well as players, buying into this idea of identity and culture.
Well, you said identity and foundation allows you to get to that continuity of success, and how legacy creates a magic, and that's what I've written down in big letters here. And I think that's quite a good way of looking at it, that if you can have this influence, this magic, this spark that can motivate, inspire, and influence the people that are still to come through. For me, that shows that you've played an important role within that program, and that you've had I'm trying to think of the word that I want to use, an influence within that, and that you've contributed to something. But I think a lot of it does come down to, and he spoke about it a lot, is this understanding your why, is that you really need to know why you're doing it, and be deep into what we spoke about with Phil around coaching philosophy, to be able to go into an environment to get a culture that is right for that group, that isn't just a makeshift model that you've taken from somewhere else, that you have that know your why of why you're there, but you want to really develop that for the people that are in front of you, that what works for who in what circumstance and why. That it's not a microwave culture. It's a culture that's been built with the group that you've got in front of you.
Yeah, I think where I think of it is, culture for me is almost like a living organism that's ever growing, it's ever evolving, and you've got to evolve with it. You've got to add certain bits. You've got to realize that some bits need to be taken away year on year on year, and it's that reflection in your action, in your practice, in what your key messages are. Because if you keep the same culture going throughout the time, it will get stale. The players will lose their interest, and even like a culture like we talked about Manchester United in there, that culture constantly evolves throughout the time. Yes, there were key non-negotiables throughout that underpinned most of it, but the surrounding elements of it have to change, to get that longevity, and especially in this modern era, you've got to evolve, and you've got to change with that. And that's where I think I love, one thing I loved that Jack did across the episode, and he mentioned it at the start, is that coaches have got to be vulnerable, got to be willing to be challenged and share. I liked that he shared his vulnerabilities throughout. So he shared stories in which he was a learning process that shaped his coaching now. Talking about making a little jab at that lad for his haircut, he knew straight away that, right, I've got to learn. These processes I'm learning with the players. Challenging himself in terms of, I'm going to coach defense this year, because and for us as coaches, we can't be stale. We've got to evolve. We've got to challenge ourselves. But the big one really was going from an outcome based to a process based within his culture. We can be very much results driven, and don't be afraid. And he is still results based driven, but you've got to enjoy the process of getting there, because that's what especially when you're dealing with, people in the development chain of younger athletes. They're the positive memories that they're going to have. Like those lads are going to have positive memories of swimming in the dam, learning and singing the team song. That's something they're going to remember, for the rest of their life when they meet up in 5 years' time. Remember that time when we were neck deep in water singing this team song before we had to go and sing it to a bunch of netball girls. That's their memories in which you're going to cherish and always remember. So I think that was fascinating.
Yeah, and that touches on to, I can't remember the American football coach that it's from. I think coach is in Seattle. And he was touching that one of his key philosophies is if a player comes up and sees me on the other side of the street, that they'll cross the road to come and give me a hug and speak to me, rather than be the person that would stay on the other side of the road and avoid. It means that I've touched that person in terms of I've had an impact on their life. I've contributed to them having that memory of connected with something they've enjoyed, and they want to come over and still have that conversation, still engage with me. And I think that is what we talk about with coaching. Is it stems into what we went into a lot of detail, and he's had a lot of reference in every episode. Is that episode with Richard about the importance of people? Everything comes back to people, and people will drive the culture. But I really like the bit that you touched on of, whether it's important for the players to belong, but it's also important for the coaches to belong within that as well. And that emphasis of belonging is it's really important for coaches to, like you say, stay motivated to develop, stay motivated to get out on that Tuesday, Thursday when it's raining sideways to go and coach, rather than staying at home. And it motivates everyone, not just on the field, but also you to keep being the best that you can be as well.
Yeah, 100%. And I think the last kind of point I want to raise, and I think this will directly help a lot of coaches, especially in the community game, in terms of embedding a culture, and that's this use of themes. Can we theme the season? Can we theme it around? For him, it was their emblem was a rhino. The players didn't really resonate with that, so they went with the wild dogs. And all of a sudden you're theming it around hunting as a pack. We're always as strong as our weakest player, but if we stick together, we hunt. We hunt together. And that's you're getting an emotional buy-in, because you're emotionalizing something that's really quite powerful. And I think for coaches that are listening to this, if you're walking into a new environment, try and get to know the club that you're in, try and get to know the local area, and see if you can begin to create themes that players will want to buy in, get emotionally attached to, because that's where you'll see real behavioural changes into, I want to be part of this club. This club represents me. I want to represent the club. And then when you're representing it on the field, when you're representing it off the field, you're always giving the best version of yourself, because you've got that sense of identity to that theme, to that club, to that coach, to those players, to the club members. And it's, I think that's a really powerful tool for any coach that wants to, start to embed a culture if they are struggling. Think about the themes in which you can shape around it.
100% agree, definitely. Another fantastic episode. I hope everyone's enjoyed it. We've got a really interesting episode next week on self-reflection, understanding self, which sort of brings a lot of this back together about what we can do moving forward. So please look out for that. Charlie's got all of our information at the end on social media, and we will see you next time.
Cheers for listening. Don't forget to join in the discussion at Big Breakdown HQ on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.